So we are going to look at the internal structure of skeletal muscles and kind of get a little perspective on that before we start looking at how muscles contract. So as we stopped last time, which is where we will start this time, we start looking at the connective tissue coverings of muscles. So muscles have three types of connective tissue coverings. We have a epimyosin, which is around each individual whole muscle. Inside each of the whole muscles, we have what are called fascicles, which are separated from each other by perimyosin. And then inside the perimyosin, we have endomyosin, which wraps around each individual muscle fiber. So we have these individual groups that keep getting smaller. It's like those little Russian nesting dolls. So we have a muscle. Inside the muscle, we have fascicles. Inside the fascicles, we have the cells. And then inside each cell, we have these myofibrils. And so we have these coverings that protect things. So epimyosin around the whole muscle, perimyosin around the fascicles, endomyosin around the muscle cells themselves. Now, when we look inside the muscle cell, so the skeletal muscle fiber, I don't know if you see this arrow pointing to it at the right underneath the skeletal muscle header. That is the cell. Inside the cell, we have these myofibrils. Now, this is one of the slides that isn't in order. I just wanted to show you that this little thing inside each cell called a myofibril is going to be very important in muscle contraction. They are divided up into these units called sarcomeres, and we're going to talk about these the next time. Now, I want to look at the internal structure, which is the next slide. Now, on this slide, this gives a lot of information. It talks about the skeletal muscle fiber, multinucleated. You'll notice that there's a lot of prefixes that are either going to be sarco or myo. One is Greek, one is Latin. They both refer to muscles. So if we enlarge this picture so we can see it better, we'll look at some of the structures. So inside the muscle cell, we've got myofibrils. We talked about that. Well, the muscle cell is very unique. It is more like a nerve than anything else. It's got a special cell membrane that's designed to transmit chemical signals, electrical signals along it. And so it has a special name, so it's called a sarcolemma, which is the name. It's not just called a cell membrane. It is called a sarcolemma, and that is important to know. Now, the sarcolemma will have these tube-like extensions that go inside the cell, and they will wrap around the myofibrils. They are called transverse tubules. If you look over to the middle right, I don't know if you can see the arrow, but there's a thing called the triad. On the bottom of it is a transverse tubule, those lists there. The transverse tubule, and you'll see a couple of them if you look down that myofibril, takes the electrical impulse that's being passed along the sarcolemma and takes it inside the cell. They can sometimes be called T-tubules, which is fine. In between the transverse tubules is a structure called the sarcoplasmic reticulum. It's comparable to the endoplasmic reticulum of other cells because it's a tubing system, but what these do is basically store calcium ions, which are the key to muscle contraction. So as the muscle gets stimulated by the nervous system, it's going to cause a charge to pass along the sarcolemma. That charge, as it passes along the sarcolemma, will go internally to the cell by way of the transverse tubules. Those transverse tubules will then electrify the sarcoplasmic reticulum, which let go of the calcium ions, and that's going to be the start of the muscle contractions, which will end up being, I believe, the next slide, or the slide after, or the next video after.